Onegaishimasu. Okay, if we start with Zazen. So one simple way to frame this process is settledness and openness. So two qualities at the same time. So the body is physically settled. Of course, we often use the term weight under side. Body is settled, yet it's open. So not settled and collapsed, not settled and condensed, settled and at the same time open. Same quality with the mind. The mind is settled, but not dull or sleepy. Settled, but open. So mind is calm, yet starkly clear. So two qualities, yin and yang, at the same time. Settled and open. You can even define the breath in those terms as well. Settled in the sense that it's dropping, filling the abdomen, not just up high in the chest, not that. It's settled and open in the sense that the belly is released, the belly is free to move with the natural ebb and flow of the breath. So all levels of ourselves, all qualities, settled and open. Nice imagery that comes to mind for me as I speak that. Bring two aspects together. The imagery that we've often used of a stone or a pebble drifting down through the water. And so that's the weight underside, that's a settling. And then it settles onto the silt at the bottom of the lake. And once we have that settledness, we expand open to be the lake itself. So first that settledness, like pebble drifting down in the lake, and then opening to the essence of the lake itself, the expanse of the lake. Settled and yet open in the great expanse. So we can kind of just let ourselves kind of imbue and absorb those qualities and ideas on the physical level, mental level, energetic level. That boils down a lot of what we're trying to do all the time and everything that we try to do in our movement or techniques. We want to be settled. One aspect of that is grounded, stable, rooted, but we're not cumbersome or plodding. That's where the openness, tenseness comes in. We're light, yet not floaty and ungrounded. That's where the settledness comes in. So two qualities, two aspects all the time, and they're continually growing, developing, deepening, becoming more and more settled and more open and expansive. And keeping that quality, two aspects together. We have the vertical and the horizontal. So in the vertical is that vertical alignment and the settling down through that vertical alignment. Horizontal is that wide lake. Keeping those qualities, vertical, settling, expanse, as we slowly rise. And seeing how much you can keep that quality, that feeling, and notice what you lose, and see if you can gently bring that back. So settled yet open and opening. Settled and settling, a continuous process. Open and opening more and more and more. And that takes us into a nice kind of shape and movement for that is Sayuendo. We start very, very slow, both because we're warming up, but also so that we can again imbue those qualities and feelings in our shape and in our movement, rather than just going into movement, into shape. And then things contracting and we get caught just in the physical and not opening to this essence and quality. So settled, that's symbolized by this wider stance, so this horse stance, settled, anchored, grounded, settled, expansive. And notice if you lose any grounding, maybe you're popping off here, tilting, leaning. So expanding, but I've lost it settled. So just a simple shape such as Sayuendo, haven't even gone into the movement of Sayuendo. Tremendous training opportunity, reveals a lot of potentials that can go wrong and allows us to explore the potential of keeping those qualities. And I shift the weight to the other side, keeping settled, pebble drifting down continuously, weight settling underside continuously, yet opening to the full expanse of the lake. Am I too one-sided? Maybe I haven't popped off here to any great degree, but maybe I'm kind of one-sided. One of the reasons it's Sayuendo that technically, physically, we turn the head this way. As you might remember, we're here and the head turns this way. One reason for that is we're balancing out physically and energetically. Partially, it protects our head, face. The person is here, we're going here. Our face is exposed here, protecting the head and face. Also, again, if I turn my head this way, everything's going this way. It's a bit becomes teetery very easily. Everything is kind of lopsided, one-sided. So physically, in a sense, counterbalances and energetically counterbalances because your eyes, your mind are going this way. So it energetically balances you out. So it's staying nice and open because you're only expanding more. And that lake, at first you can just think of two directions, side to side, expanding. But the lake actually is expansive in all directions, right? Eventually, you'll be able to be more and more truly expansive in all directions. The only thing when you're losing the settling, the physical tactic of that is to sink your weight into this leg and hip, not leaning, not throwing your upper body this way, but actually sinking down this vertical axis, this axis here. The weight drops here, and I expand out from there, from that vertical axis. So right now, I'm not talking about the central vertical axis. It's the vertical axis here, dropping down that hip and that leg, and from there, I expand out. And the more I settle, the more I expand. So I'd like to explore that just for a moment, talking about how these two qualities, two essences, are interrelated, two sides of the coin, mutually inclusive, mutually additive. One creates more and more of the other. So as I settle and think more and more, can I make the gear, make the connection that settling also creates me expanding more? So I'm not, okay, I settle a little bit and now I reach. Can I allow the settling, sinking, create the expanding? And then eventually you'll have a self-correcting awareness, have a self-correcting mechanism that I need to mentally extend more that way because I'm being a little bit lopsided, physically and energetically a little bit lopsided. So I naturally start to give more mental extension the other way to balance it out. So I'm truly a lake. Truly a lake, even. It's not the nature of a lake to be lopsided. It's very hard for a lake to be lopsided. Evenness to it. Even weightedness, even expanse. So as I sink down, can I have that create the expansion and not just in one direction? As I settle and sink, have that create my extension and expansion. As I settle and sink, can I have that create that? So rather than going to one side and reaching out, I don't have to reach out. I just settle, intentional vectors, settling, I create the gears. The gear that translates the settling into an expansion. That's what opens my arms and makes my shape. I don't make my shape. So again, even Hami no Kamae, you don't make the shape. That will be rigid and fixed and not very responsive and free. The shape is made by our intentional currents, intentional vectors. Intentional vector this way, and I can make the connection, the gear that translates that to expansion. And the more I settle and think, can I have that extend me more and more, open my shoulder joints. So as you relax the body, to allow that to happen through the body, you feel the joints start to open. Another dimension we'll add to that, if you have room in your brain to think of it, to work with it, is the opening of the spine as well. So now I've been talking about settling here and this kind of horizontal or lateral expansion or vastness as in a lake. But eventually it's all directions and including the vertical. So sinking down opens up my shoulder joints, but will also open up the joint of the spine. The space between the vertebrae will increase as well until that head rises and the hips sink. We're always talking about that, right? Hips drop, the spine. Now that's happening now organically for me as I drop the weight down, have that intentional vector, have that open up my shoulder joints, have that extend and open my body, and then also open up my spine. As I sink down, my spine is open. And I do it on this side. Releasing down, opens up my shoulder joints, opens up my arm shape, sends my energy, not just that direction, but the other direction as well. And now also it opens up my spine. And the more I settle, the more I can open up my spine. The more I settle and sink, the more I settle, the more my body can be released and open. And then can you take that through the transfer from one side to the other? So we're working this fixed side. Can I work on that? Can I notice what I lose, when I lose it, as I make a transfer or transition? And so can I keep that for longer and longer time periods over more and more movement? Noticing when I lose it. There's probably at some point in there where you're coming up or you're disconnecting from the ground or you're losing the thinking, settling, drifting down through the lake like a pebble. It's probably some point where you're popping up and losing that. But notice where that happens. And so when you start to lose those gaps and be able to have less and less of those gaps and glitches and disconnect, your thinking just continues more and more and more, and therefore your opening continues more and more and more. You get more and more settled, more and more open, even as you go into movement, even as you go into technique. So literally as you do a technique with a partner, it can be more and more bolstering of these really pleasant qualities. And rather than then going into some sort of interaction and trying to do something and that destroys the structure and the flow, it only becomes more supporting and bolstering of these qualities. Once you have a sense of these qualities enough, and that's where most of your attention goes to, and that's the gears that you're working, whatever you're doing is another opportunity to work those gears and to make those qualities and those connections. Everything you do can be turned into fuel to further feed those qualities and connections.
So Sensei, I'm probably being too literal, but how do you apply the quality of sinking through the transition? Like it makes sense in the arrival and the leg and all of those qualities. But it doesn't make much sense on the surface through the transition.
Yeah, you're exactly
Other
right.
than not to bob up.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's exactly right that it's easier to get that sinking on the side. You know, especially when we have that version where we do the beat, the 2 beat, right? Sink, 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 sink. And that even makes it more obvious that, well, on the side here is where I can sink the weight. So you're exactly right. Physically and sensationally, in terms of physical sensation, this will be more obvious, or even just 1 beat. This will be a more obvious place physically in terms of what you can feel, where you can sink the weight. So when you're transferring over and you're in this mid realm, on the sides, you feel that I can sink, you feel that you can drop that weight. Just have the intention flowing down. So it feels the same way in terms of the energy and the intention. But you're exactly right. So it's done intentionally and more on the level of intention than physical. Because it's true, in the middle, we're not doing this, but on the side, we might be doing that. But I can be doing that inside. I can be doing that inside. If you're doing it inside, you're doing it intentionally. So let's just spend a few moments with that. And again, let me know if you need further clarification or if you have any comments on how that's going for you. Physically, you can probably really track or notice that's physical thinking here. Keep that same feeling going on inside your body intentionally as you cross. You might feel that your hips are falling, free falling, and or imagining that your legs and feet are roots growing into the ground in this mid realm to help get more of that energetic direction and the intention going that way. So again, part of what I do is I imagine my hips falling away. I allow my hips to sink energetically, and that tends to create the sense of rooting. My legs and feet just fall into the earth. So that's a feeling sense. So now I'd like just to explore this just a bit further. See if you can have the sense, it's just a matter of placing the intention, setting the intention, that it continually grows, that you're sinking, physically sinking, energetically sinking, imaginatively sinking, intentionally sinking, whatever level you can work with. You're continuing to sink, absolutely continually. So it's either going further and further into the earth or just a infinite, consistent, continual sinking. And of course, that translates to a continual expanding, expansiveness, continual. So maybe we kind of reached an endpoint in our mind or thinking or feeling. Sink a little bit, sink a little bit, extend a little bit, extend a little bit. But it probably had an edge, a limit. So I want it to be continuous. So instead of continual sinking, continual expanding, expansiveness only grows, only continues. Thinkingness is inexorable, cannot be stopped, cannot be stopped. So just have that occur within your movement, inside the movement, from inside the movement, outward, continuing to sink, 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 sink through all parts of the movement, only thinking deeper. And that translates to expanding further and further and further and further. Sinking further, Standing further. Sinking deeper. Standing further out. On a feeling level, intentional level. And maybe you notice what that does for your shape. What it does for the feeling of your body being open. You may have noticed that opening up your body, literally opening up your joints, and eventually more and more, including the spine. Opening. And you may find that now your body's being opened for you rather than you trying to open up your body. It's being opened from the inside out, very much a radiation. From the inside out, like a flower unfurling. From the inside out rather than muscularly trying to open. Okay, any comments or questions about that? Let's take that into, yes, any comments? We're okay?
Well, I think, for me, and sorry, this was coming from the Tai Chi class, like I've never liked Sayuendo. I don't get it. It doesn't feel good. But what I'm feeling through this that's maybe new, it appears linear, A, B sort of thing, in adding some, even if it's imagined sense of a 360 dimensionality, then it starts to feel something else. And so that I can see how it might be some of the things you're speaking to, but at least it gets me over my irritation for not really getting it.
Good, yeah. So, yeah, thanks for revealing that, because I think that's fairly common with Sayuendo. And I'll even say for myself that it was very, I would say, a very linear feeling and movement for me for a long time. And now it's a very pleasant, enjoyable movement for me. Literally, Sayuendo now is like Qigong. Sayuendo for me has a Qigong quality and feeling. It is Qigong for me now. So that's there. It will be there for you. So just before we leave Sayuendo behind, then let's just tack one other little thing on. This will be a little bit more physical, and then it can be energetic as well, of course. And it just triggered this when you said it can be quite linear. Just on the level of making, turn sideways here, where you make this as big as possible. Of course, we'll probably have the idea of making this big, even though I know I should go in both directions. So that's okay if I'm doing that or not. It's big this way, big this way. So right now, focus on actually big out here in the transition, in other words, again. So again, I'm going to exaggerate, big out here. What can tend to happen for sure is maybe big out to the side, and then we come in and big out to the side, and we come in, big out to the side. And that is very linear, and it's not complete, it's not sutured. It's not totally together. Now, it doesn't mean we never come in, or we don't, and it doesn't mean we never change our shape. And this is for training, to open things up, the body, the energy, the intention, to get a certain quality, a certain essence, and then our shape can be much more adjustable, changeable, and the shape doesn't matter so much. But for training, we want to be way out here. Just like a sword strike, we want to make it as big as possible. Doesn't mean that sometimes we can't do a short cut, but we need to have the essence of this. So just on a physical level, make this transition as big as possible. And even if you're leaning forward the first few times, like I might actually lean forward again to get a sense, changing my body and my mind to get out here. In particular, if I tend to be quite shortened in the transition, like tend to be quite in and then out, then it's totally fine and a proper training methodology to exaggerate even to the point of creating this angle here to get my arms, my body have a sense of being the opposite of what it was tending to do. And then I can refine that and clean that up. So in the middle, it's as big as possible. Just like Manucci, as big as possible, but not locking the elbows and not locking the shoulder joints or raising them. But just like Manucci is big, big arc, as big as possible without locking the elbows. I want this as big as possible without locking the elbows. Now let's do this. Let's not go all the way to the sides. Let's only go to basically to the front corner, or maybe slightly beyond, to emphasize this front area. And again, of course, palms up, elbow slightly bent. And as I drop my hips, that sends my arms out. Dropping my hips sends my arms out. So that's the, if I do it just purely in a physical level, dropping my hips sends the arms out. Dropping the hips sends the arms out. Now my arms, dropping the hips, sends the arms out. That's the levers and the gears that I'm setting up intentionally. So I'm just doing the front part so I can really work on extending my arms, keeping my body and arms open through the front or through the transitional part of this particular move. And then if I can make that happen because I'm releasing my hips, you see me drop down an inch or two there. And I didn't try to squat down. I didn't try to bend my legs more. I just had the intention and feeling of dropping and hanging my hips. Dropping and hanging my hips made me drop down physically into what looked like a squat. And I'm letting that send the energy out. I'm letting that send the energy out, which sends my arms out. So just now emphasizing, focusing on this transitional zone, the front area, and dropping the hips will send those elbows outward and forward. And this can be a helpful way to get beyond the feeling of it being linear. And I extend to the side. I extend to the side. So here we're training the mind and the energy sense that out here is just as much part of it as out there. Out here, out here. Forward, dropping the hips, extending out. Dropping the hips, extending out. Dropping the hips, extending out. Let those shoulder joints go. And then go a little further. So, but the key thing is don't try to go to the side. You may end up going as far as to the side, but don't make the side an end point. The only so-called end point is infinity. You're flowing out to infinity. So going to the side is not your end point. You're flowing out, you're just allowing it to go further, almost like you couldn't stop it if you wanted to. You're just doing the process and the qualities, and you couldn't stop it even if you wanted to. And so the movement will just tend to carry further, but you're not trying to get to the side and stop at the side. Flow out in front, and just keep doing that. Just keep doing that. Okay, I want to bring one other little aspect into that, because in Tai Chi, we'll talk about first movement in Tai Chi is called commencement. And we'll often talk about, when we're getting a little deeper into it, we'll say, don't raise your arms up. Don't think of up, because you'll pull your shoulders up and you'll create a lot of tension here and everything comes up, weight upper side. What we'll say is to refine the teaching and refine the movement is you just send the arms out. If you just do out, 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 you don't have to do up, up will happen for you. In fact, yeah, if you're not doing this already, please do this with me, because it'll be actually a nice tactile physical experience. I would like you to extend your arms forward and do not try to do up. Do not try to lift your arms. In fact, you don't really want to lift your arms. All you want to do, you don't, in fact, you have an aversion to lifting your arms, but you must send them out. You send them out, send them out, send them out, send them out, send them out further. Do this really strong intentionally. You can do it even physically too. Physically, I send my arms out, send my arms out, send my arms out, send my arms out. What happens when you send your arms out? What happens when you send your arms out? They must come up. Simply because the arms are of limited length. Because the arms are of limited length, when you have a continuous outflow, continuous reaching or stretching, or direct outflow, directly out, they must inscribe an arc because they're of limited length. So that total pull, that infinite pull, must raise the arms. It'd be the same. Imagine that I'm grabbing the fingers of each hand. Someone's grabbing the fingers of each hand and pulling your hands in front of you, away from you. So imagine someone's grabbing each hand at the fingers and they're pulling your arms not up. They're not trying to pull your arms up. They're just taking your arms away from you in front. So imagine someone's grabbing the fingers of each hand and they're pulling the arms out in front towards the wall in front of you. They're not trying to lift your arms up. They're just pulling them out in front of you. What will happen? They will rise. So if you get a sense of that, I just do out, and the up happens for me. And if I really relax into it, it'll really open up my joints as well, very nicely, gently open up the joints. So I don't do up, I just do out and up happens for me. Now, if I did up, this happens. Okay? So we can translate that into this particular move. I'm not going to do the side. I'm not going to do side. I'm only going to do out, but I'm going to add a weight shift. Out, and I continue out, and lo and behold, there we are, Sayuendo. And notice how far this arm is over. Most people, they're too foreshortened here. They're like this, it's tight. It's out there, because this is open. And I don't want to, again, compromise my structure, my alignment, and my openness. But I am open, so that's over here, that's not stuck here. But I'm just doing out, flowing out. Again, you can imagine someone's grabbing your hands. Now, instead of pulling back away from you, they're pulling back away from you and over. They're not trying to take you to the side, they're just trying to take you across the room. So flow out, drop your hips, just send your arms out and as you shift your weights, have the arms continue to flow out to try to touch the wall in front of you. Flow out, continue shifting the weight. Look at that, the arms are going to the side. So they arrive at the side, but you're not trying to get to that side. Flow out. Shift the weight, hang out, elongate the spine, hang out, sink, flow out, shift the weight. Your arms will arrive eventually, at some point in time, all the way to the side, but your goal is not to get to the side. Your goal is to stay open, settled, and expansive. Settling and expanding. That's your goal. We just have some directional vectors, intentional vectors, mental directions that create a movement. But we're just settling, expanding, or opening. Out in front of me, out in front. As I shift the weight, lo and behold, my arms are drifted or pulled out over to the side. Okay? So Cheryl, is that feeling any different for you?
Yeah, so what that's actually bringing me to for the first time is a sense of how the upper and lower body can be integrated. Because that, I think, has been the root of my dissatisfaction. It was always bits working together, not a whole.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Now let's see if we can take this training, this quality, these feelings, the sensations into a different movement. One that might be nice to explore with this is Kokyu window into Sayu window. Kokyu window into Sayu window. So we have more movement, more complex movement, so more trouble will tend to sneak in. So notice when you pop up, or as you mentioned, lose the integration or connection between upper and lower body. So just keep your awareness awake and notice what you lose. That's just as good as getting things correct. That's just as good as doing it well. Noticing what you're losing when you're losing it, that's success. That's just as good as classical success and doing it quote unquote right. It's actually, it's just as successful, it's just as important. Noticing, if you can notice what you lose when you lose it, that's a big win. So, settling, hips drop, spine open, expanding or opening, just like a vast lake. A lake that's so deep and heavy, so expansive. If you're one or the other, you're quite lopsided in terms of energetic. If you just have that deepness of a deep lake, it's oppressive and collapsing, condensing, and squeezing, pressing, very condensing. You just have that. If you have just vastness, just openness, then you're ungrounded, you're flighty, and you're very manipulatable. The slightest little interaction from someone sets you off. So we want both. Both. So take a moment before you start. Settling, extending, expanding. And see if you can keep the hips dropping, keeps hips falling, dropping as you do a movement. And let the continuous dropping, continuous sinking, send the arms out in the shape and direction that the arms go. Just let the sinking and dropping move the arms and send the arms out. So I mainly hang and sink. And the sinking, remember the gears, I create the intentional gears, sinking, send the energy out. And you can do 1 beat or 2 beats, whatever works for you right now. Notice when you lose it, where you lose it. Sinking and opening, sinking and opening, and sinking creates opening. Sinking sends the energy out. Weight under side. And weight under side allows a connected expansion to occur. Without weight under side, expansion might occur, but it's not connected, it's not organic, it's not grounded. So connected organic expansion